Most corporate organizations operate on a deeply flawed mental model of performance management. It usually looks like a brief, rushed goal-setting session in January, followed by a frantic push to fill out an appraisal form in December. The error in this linear model is that it treats the 11 months in between as an administrative void, a dead zone where no performance data is systematically collected or tracked. True performance management is never a single event. It is a continuous, closed-loop mechanical system designed to identify, measure, and develop performance all year round. To function correctly, this system must balance 6 competing purposes simultaneously: maintaining strategic alignment, fostering developmental growth, and producing reliable administrative documentation. This brings us to the core operational rule of the theoretical model, the principle of systemic inheritance. The pipeline is strictly load-bearing. Every downstream stage inherits the exact data output of the node immediately preceding it. If an error occurs early in the sequence, that corruption cascades through every subsequent phase. When a December review meeting collapses into dispute, the failure rarely belongs to the meeting itself. It is a mathematical symptom of a vital stage bypassed months earlier. The first stage in this cycle is prerequisites. Before a single objective is written, the organization must secure 2 distinct datasets: strategic knowledge of where the company is going, and granular knowledge of what the specific job actually entails. We capture this granular data through job analysis. But there is a trap here. Organizations frequently evaluate a role's tasks purely by how often they happen. To see why this fails, look at this scatter plot mapping task frequency against operational criticality. Take a dispatcher at Sahar Logistics. They spend roughly 2 hours every shift on route planning. Because it takes up so much time, it naturally plots high on the frequency axis. But consider the cold chain temperature check. It takes less than 4 minutes per shift, placing it extremely low on frequency. However, if missed, spoiled cargo causes the catastrophic loss of a client contract, driving criticality to the top. If an HR department analyzes this job relying on frequency alone, the temperature check vanishes from the job description entirely. We see the fallout of skipping prerequisites in the case of Falcon Harvest, an organization that rolled out January performance goals without updating job descriptions that were 6 years out of date. With no new data on what the roles actually required, managers were forced to simply copy and paste the previous year's objectives. The resulting data was fictional. 2 roles that had functionally merged over the years were still being measured as separate entities, meaning the exact same output was counted twice. By September, when ratings were challenged, HR could not produce a defensible record of what either role was supposed to deliver. Skipping the prerequisite stage produces no visible error in January. It simply guarantees strategic misalignment everywhere else in the cycle. Once the prerequisites are established, the data flows into Node 2, performance planning. This phase is built on 4 distinct pillars: results, behaviors, competencies, and the development plan. The standard managerial error is collapsing this complex 4-part matrix into a single highly pressured conversation purely about numerical targets. Results define exactly what the employee achieves, but evaluating a professional exclusively on their output creates a dangerous vulnerability. That is why behaviors and competencies form the next 2 pillars. They measure how the work is done, acting as strict guardrails against toxic execution. On this performance dashboard for the Marhaba Hospitality Group, a front desk employee named Tariq displays a massive positive spike in upsell revenue, leading the floor for 3 consecutive quarters. But looking closely at the secondary data reveals a glaring red warning overlay. An equally massive spike in guest complaints escalated to the duty manager. Tariq achieved his leading revenue numbers by aggressively pitching upsells at the exact moment guests were most exhausted, right at check-in. The final pillar required to balance these metrics is a concrete development plan. This specifies areas for improvement and must be agreed upon and properly resourced before the year even begins, not tacked on as a December afterthought. Demanding raw results without defining behavioral standards simply incentivizes employees to hit their targets by burning through the organization's goodwill and capital. The timeline now enters Node 3, performance execution. Spanning 11 months, this is the longest stage of the cycle, and the one most frequently abandoned to more urgent daily tasks. In the case of Nashira Retail, goals set in January were met with 11 straight months of managerial silence. Looking at this 12-month calendar, we see huge empty gaps spanning nearly the entire year. During that void, 3 critical events occurred. A supplier change rendered an objective impossible in March. The employee absorbed a resigning colleague's workload in June, and they averted a major customer crisis in August. Because active execution tracking was skipped, these vital actions were never documented. The evidence simply dissolves into static. By the time the manager prepares the appraisal, they are relying entirely on their memory of the final 6 weeks. This forces a critical failure at Node 4, performance assessment. An empty execution stage restricts the manager to severe recency bias, forcing them to grade an entire year based on a fraction of the timeline. A defensible assessment requires an absolute separation between managerial inference and dated, documented evidence. To ensure absolute fairness across the company, these assessments must undergo a rigorous process called calibration, as utilized effectively by Quanat Foods. In calibration, managers compare draft ratings and their supporting evidence across different teams before any scores are finalized. This ensures that a score of 4 requires the exact same level of performance in 2 completely different business units. An assessment only carries formal weight if it rests on continuous documentation, rather than a frantic recollection assembled the night before a meeting. The process finally arrives at Node 5, the performance review meeting. For many, this is a source of intense anxiety. A proper review parses 3 timeframes simultaneously. First, the past, relying on documented behaviors and results anchored to timestamps. Next, the present, stating the compensation consequences of that performance. Finally, the future, bridging demonstrated skills into new objectives for the road ahead. The difference in execution is stark. A failing review is a 12-minute session where a manager reads off a screen and treats disagreement as insubordination. A successful review takes 40 minutes, allows the employee to speak first, and ensures that any disagreement is formally recorded. When money is on the table, the present will always crowd out the future, unless the meeting is rigorously structured to protect all 3 timeframes. This brings us to the final stage of the cycle, Node 6, renewal and recontracting. The terminology is deliberate. This is a recontracting, a precise renegotiation based on new data generated over the past year, not merely issuing instructions. The cycle closes, and the specific insights produced in Node 6 feed directly back into Node 2, upgrading the inputs and expanding the system's capacity for the coming year. Performance management is a fragile, load-bearing architecture where every single link matters. To fix a broken performance system, you must stop blaming the annual appraisal form. You have to look upstream, evaluate the pipeline, and locate the exact stage where the work was abandoned.